I think I was invited to the convention because, quite frankly, I think Democrats are smart, right? They know that people, for good reason, are not trusting the mainstream media the way they used to. And a growing majority are getting their news from independent sources like me, right? So they have invited us, I think, as a way to meet the people where they are, where they're actually getting their information. So they're looking to connect with the American public and can make their case. That's what the convention is about. And they've invited a group of people that the American people trust and listen to in order to kind of have the best shot at doing that. So it seems like a smart move to me to do that, because this is sort of how people are getting their information these days when the mainstream media is behaving the way it does.
Could you explain a
Yeah,
little bit more about the content that you do and how you think that'll
yeah.
fit in with the convention?
Now, listen, I got into doing this because no one in my life cared about politics. And I really did. And I would watch my friends' eyes glaze over when I talked about political stuff, or when I talk about some issue, they'd be like, oh my God, it's so boring. And then when Obama lost the second midterms in his second term of presidency, I was devastated, and no one in my life cared about it. And I thought, that's not right. I think it's just that we are all so checked out from politics that we need to kind of re-engage. So I know that I started this project way back in 2015 as a way to kind of educate and inspire people. It's always been about truth and facts and supporting democracy, supporting the American experiment. It's what my book is about, coming out in September. And I've never changed that mandate. But I mean what I'm saying. And I think I'm very authentic, and people can tell. I always say that I don't do the news. That's not my thing. I don't do the news. I explain the news. I break down what's going on into these, if you look at my rants, my kitchen rants, into these kind of digestible bite-sized pieces to make it easy to understand, but also in the case of my short form videos, to make it easy to share. I often say that I put into words what people are thinking, or I'm thinking what people can't quite put into words, right? So I speak to normal people in normal language. I don't talk like an intellect. I talk like normal people talk. And it's never been about me looking smart, right? It's about my audience feeling smart.
What was the process like getting kind of invited to it? What was it like getting approached by the party to invite you to such a big event?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was just an email. It was just a plain old email, and then you have to fill out a lot of forms, to be cleared by the Secret Service, cleared by different people.
Yes.
It's very similar in many ways to going to the White House for an event. But I think one of the greatest things about where we are, especially with the Democrats, because I can't speak to what the Republicans are doing, is that when they invite creators like me and the events I have done, the White House and now this convention, they never tell me what to say, what I can say, what they would like me to say. They're buying me. And I have been super critical of the Democrats in the past. I have videos where I'm like, what are they doing? And they still want me there. But I am sincerely enthusiastic about this ticket. So that will hopefully come through. And I'm sure that they were like, well, this might work out well. I think I had done a fair amount of videos that were pro Vice President Harris well before she was ever the candidate, because I really felt like if people understood what an excellent leader she was, they would be less concerned about Joe Biden's age. So I had a 10-minute video back in January about her experiences and her work and what she'd done, because I felt like, again, people just didn't know. And when you don't know, you're like, you check out, and then you're much more susceptible to misinformation. It's not going to affect their convention to have creators there. The Democrats have been really clear about what they stand for, right? They stand for freedom and democracy and human rights, that we're not going back to a time, right? Before women's rights, before workers' rights, before gay rights, before civil rights, right? That we want to move forward into the future with hope and faith in the American experiment. And I think despite all we see from right-wing pundits and politicians, that message is a winning one.
So you'd say as a content creator, at least in this situation, it's the accessibility piece that's the biggest reason.
I think so. I mean, it's like having your friend go to an event and you're like, how was it? And you're like, oh, it's like this, except we just do that online, right?
What are your plans in regards to making content? Is it going to be purely, long form content? Is it going to be more kind of a mix of the two? Or are you going to kind of stick with your usual mix between the two?
I think it's probably going to be a mix between the two. I mean, first of all, I've never been to a convention, right? So I will be figuring it out as I go along and then laying it out for people. Like I said before, I don't do the news. So you probably won't find me, the content creator, out there like, hey, it's me and so, like that. You won't see that in live time. That's not what I do. It's not my shtick. I don't need you to be like, look at all these people she's with. If anything, you will see the people that I talked to after, because I've edited into a story that I think is worth telling. But I think that my idea of going there, why I decided to go, was because I think most people don't know how conventions work, right? So I would love to give people the context so they can best understand. Not engaging with or understanding politics doesn't mean that politics doesn't affect us. It just means we can't affect it. So I try really hard to give people the information that they need and then give them the voice that they might not have, because I really think that knowledge is power. And the more we know about something, the more we care about something. And change only happens when people care.
Is there anything different that you plan on doing in terms of engaging with your community?
I am sending an email today to the people who subscribe to my political channel, because people like me often can only function with patrons, people that pay for a monthly subscription or that kind of thing. Otherwise, it would be impossible for me to do what I do. I'm sending a letter to all of my subscribers to see what they would like to know. I've never monetized this certain channel, so I don't cater to what people generally respond to. I'm not saying, oh, this will do well. I tell people what I think is the most pressing thing to know.
Well, my last question for our interview, is there anything further that you feel is important to discuss surrounding featured content creators at the convention, including yourself, as well as just the overall new form sense of media that we have that I haven't, addressed, or that you feel is necessary to reiterate?
I think the thing is that I had Brian Tyler Cohen on my podcast, and we were talking about the importance of these independent voices and the fact that the mainstream media has really truly let us down, that they are part of the problem. Because when you make news into entertainment, and you make, the 24-hour news cycle was a real problem for us, because you have to constantly fill those hours. And then you start filling those hours with people fighting, or, both sides in things that don't deserve both sides, like, is climate change real? This guy says no, and this guy says yes. You're like, well, 98% of publishing scientists say yes. So that's not really, there's no really both sides to that. It's existing. That's a fact. Here we go. There's not both sides to should women have a vote, right? There's not both sides to should we, there's just not. And yet we fill the air with all of this noise. And people are either disconnected, or they are uninformed, or they are misinformed. And I think that we are seeing the switch in a media landscape to a more organic way of getting information from people who really started from a place of, in many cases, I would say in my case, of altruism, right? I didn't make money for years and years. I just really felt like people needed to know this information.